Hey y'all, it's Monica. I am here with our special guest, Kali Fontanilla. She was a teacher in the California school system for 15 years. And although she did love that job, she could not in good conscience continue. So she left her tenured position and moved to Florida. She's been an outspoken critic of public school policy, especially critical race theory, and has forged a new path, offering an alternative to what I'm calling captive education. So please join me in welcoming Kali Fontanilla. Hello, Kali. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm super excited about your story and your solutions. So I think I want to start from the top, if you don't mind. I am still a captive of California, and my kids went to school here. It's been a struggle. It remains a struggle. And so I can totally relate and admire your courage for having left a job that you loved. So, but I'm also interested a little bit in your background. So I'm the youngest of 9, you're the oldest of 7. I want to hear how this was your calling, and kind of what you achieved, and then what you had to risk or lose or trade in. So maybe start from the top.
Sure. It's funny that you mentioned leaving a career that I love, because I really did love being a teacher. I taught in Salinas, California. So if you're familiar with that area, it's the salad bowl of California. It's where a lot of the migrant workers are there. I taught mainly Hispanic kids. I taught the English learners and the low readers. It was an extremely fulfilling job, exhausting, but I loved it. I would leave at the end of the day invigorated from a day of teaching. And I did that for 15 years. And I was a tenured teacher in Salinas, just enjoying my career, worked really hard to get where I was at. I had 2 teaching credentials, a master's in education. And this is coming from someone who never really liked school.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I became a teacher, because I wanted to reach the kids that don't like it. A lot of teachers, especially English teachers, are really into school, and they were the A student. That was not me. I was the student that just really didn't enjoy being in the classroom. I didn't like all of the boring books we had to read and all of that. So I wanted to reach that kid, and that was my goal. And my husband and I, we were both teachers, and everything started changing in the last, I would say, especially during the Trump presidency. And I started seeing a lot of rumblings of my career being very different than what it was when I first started. And I think a lot of teachers are saying the same thing. And that's not even just talking politically, even just the students have changed. We have far more students with mental health issues, parents that are harder to deal with, a lot more. We don't have as much autonomy in our classroom. And a lot of the reason for that is because of the left. The left has gone, the left-leaning teachers have become too radical. And so now there's a lot more checks and balances when you're a teacher. And yeah, so I noticed that things started shifting during the Trump presidency. It was still tolerable. My classroom was still a haven. I always kept my classroom politically neutral. I did my job. I focused on making sure my students could read at grade level. That was the goal of my job, right? And because I taught the low readers and the students that were learning English. And so I always kept my classroom politically neutral. My students had no idea how I voted. And in fact, during my career, I switched from being left to right.
I heard that.
Yeah. No one knew.
Nice.
None of my students knew that, right? And then 2020 happened, and everything went nuts. First, it started with COVID. I will never forget when I told my students that they're probably going to shut down the schools, and my students didn't believe me. And they were actually keeping the students in the dark. They didn't want them to know that the school was going to shut down. And I told them, I was like, you guys, we're probably going to shut down.
Prepare.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was on a Friday.
Get your hair done.
Yeah,
get
exactly.
Your Botox, like it's coming.
Exactly. And it was on a Friday. There was an announcement made at the end of the school day that you guys will not be coming back because we need to slow the spread. And this is coming from a county that had 0 cases at the time. It was because the neighboring counties were starting to shut down. And I remember thinking, this is a complete overreaction, because I lived through SARS. I lived through Zika. SARS actually affected children. SARS.
I was going to say kids got it until they started vaccinating kids.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, this is a complete overreaction. Normally we had you're telling me this is the most deadly infectious disease we've ever had in my lifetime come hit our country. And so they shut down the schools and told the students it was only going to be 2 weeks. 2 weeks turned into a year and a month, and
Yeah.
teaching online. And that's when I got to see what the other teachers were teaching in the class in the class.
How? Oh,
So we
because they were in your wait, because of your do you have kids yourself?
because we all shared the same platform and we had to upload our lessons and we could click.
Oh,
I've never been able to do that before. I've never been able to see what other teachers
right.
were
You'd
doing
be
in the
teaching
classroom.
their
And I
teacher.
think a lot of people, a lot of parents
Interesting.
were, even though it was totally hard to all of a sudden have to make sure your kids are learning online. I mean, what do working parents do? What do it was a complete shift, radical shift, right? Of what education in this country looks like. All of a sudden everyone's at home, all the students are at home and the teachers are all online. But there was a blessing that came from it in that we were able to see what was happening in the classroom. And mind you, this was with the knowledge that parents could be watching. Parents could be
Right.
seeing what you're teaching on a Zoom classroom, right? So even then it was a bit censored because of course you keep in
Yeah.
mind that there's parents in the background. So I was teaching online and I noticed that several of my students were failing this class called ethnic studies. And this was a required class in ninth grade. They cut down health class by half the year and they gave students,
That's hilarious. It
yes.
was the biggest health it's like when they shut the churches. I'm like, "You think we're all dying and you're
Mhm.
shutting the churches down? Like,
Yeah,
we should
exactly.
all be going to church."
Yes, and kept the strip clubs open. That was
Right,
that was
right.
where I was like, "Really? So you can
Yeah,
get a lap dance, but
yeah.
you
No,
can't
you
go
could definitely get pot delivered to your
confess to a
house.
priest or whatever." Yeah,
Right. I did confession on the sidewalk into across a gate
yeah,
to my priest. I was like, "Dude,
yeah,
have some courage. This is not,
yeah,
what they were
uh-huh.
doing in the year 100, you know?"
Exactly, exactly. So with that, my students were failing this ethnic studies course, mainly the boys, and they were all getting Fs. And I was like, what's going on? Because I'm the teacher that I taught the readers, the low readers, and the English learners. So it was very important for me to see how they were doing in their other classes because that's a reflection of
Oh,
my work.
yeah, right.
And
They need to be able to access the material, and that's so
exactly.
you're the
So we would
foundational
do grade
class.
checks once a week, and I noticed this
Wow.
pattern, F, F, F. And I would say about half my students were failing that class. And this is ninth graders. So I decided to go look at the curriculum. Like, what is this teacher? And also, my students told me that the class was stupid. So then I was like, guys, why are you guys all failing this
Yeah.
class? We do grade checks. Like, Miss Fontanilla, this class is so dumb. Why do we
Yeah,
have to
and
take
they're
this class?
14-year-olds, you're saying,
Yes,
right? Yeah, so
exactly.
you know what? They're not they are not dumb. 14
Yeah.
is not, they're
Why do we have to?
savvy.
So I went and looked at the curriculum, and it was leftist indoctrination from beginning to end. Students were taught critical race theory explicitly, not even just hidden. They were taught the definition of critical race theory. They were taught to analyze school policy through the critical race theory lens.
Can you give a little bit of what that means? Because people throw that out,
Sure. Oh,
CRT, but,
and
like,
that's
what does it,
important.
like,
What
mean
is
to
it?
you or them or
Okay.
what?
So critical race theory is not the teaching of Black history. So when people say that the left is trying, I mean, the right is trying to
Yeah.
ban Black history, that's not what it is. It's putting a lens on the way that you teach anything. The way that, so basically you're viewing everything from the experience of your skin color. And that's what critical race theory is. So skin color comes first. You're viewing it through. So for example, I'm going to give an example of they put guilt on the skin color or oppression on the skin color. Doesn't matter who you are, what your personal experience is. If you are white, you have white privilege. If you are Black, you are oppressed. And that's the most basic way to explain it.
That's
It's
yeah.
collectivism. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's so interesting because, that you put it that way. I never thought of it that way. Because
mhm,
for me, I think it's just based on my own what shaped me as a person. My relative and absolute economic status as being, kind of, lower middle class,
yeah.
was probably the most formative thing, and also the home environment, being the youngest of 9 in a really tumultuous cultural
Mhm.
period in the suburbs of New York, a lot of drugs and everything like that, way more defined who I am and what my experience is than what I can't even I actually don't even know the word for what the color of my skin is. I don't
Yeah.
know. Tan?
Olive. Yeah.
Olive, yeah. I don't really know, and it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know
Yeah,
anyone who has the exact same skin color as I do,
exactly. And
and,
so with
so I
with
never
it
thought of it
come
that way.
yeah,
Mhm.
with it comes, so when you are in a class that is based around the theory of critical race theory, there'll be things like a privilege quiz. And my students were given a privilege quiz on day 5 in this class. And in the quiz, they were given 12 questions. And one of the questions was, how many books do you have in your home? Do you have more than 50 books? Then you went down on privilege. Do you have, do your parents is your parents' first language English? If the answer was yes, you went up on the privilege quiz. If you was no, you went down. And then you were ranked against your classmates. And there was a
Wow.
question from the teacher that said, how does it feel to be on the bottom? How does it feel to be on the top? And these are 12 very loaded questions. Of course,
Wow.
there weren't questions on, are your parents separated? Do you have a father in the home? I
Yes.
mean, there's everyone has their own individual experiences, and
Mhm.
this just takes that completely away. And another tenet of critical race theory is intersectionality. One of the founders of the theory, Kimberly Crenshaw, she came with this term intersectionality. It's basically counting your different oppressions, and the students were shown a wheel. It was like this wheel graph, and in the middle, it went from privileged to least privileged, and in the middle, it was white, male, Christian, and then it was like as able-bodied, and then it was like as if you're black,
Right,
lesbian,
right.
paraplegic or whatever,
Yeah, right.
you're the least privileged. And they had children count their intersectionalities.
And,
And yeah,
if you're a child, that can get into your head
yes,
that I think, like, victimhood is child abuse, like, teaching
absolutely. And
people that.
especially for teenagers, we do not
Yeah.
need a bunch of victim mindset teenagers, right?
No, because you can
So
never get out.
exactly. And that's part of the reason why I think a lot of these white left-leaning teens are wanting to be trans or wanting to be part of a
Of
community that is
course.
oppressed so they can
Absolutely.
have something to be
Yes.
like, "There's a reason why the world's all against me," right?
Yes, I live in LA, and I'm like, no one is more hated than I see some of these girls, I'm like, "No one's more hated than you." So, of
Yeah,
course, you wanna be anything but, and they give you
exactly.
labels that you can choose.
Yes,
There's some that you get to
yes,
choose.
yes, exactly. So it's this hierarchy of oppression that is being pushed on our students. And then they also had another lesson on Black Lives Matter that was very pro Black Lives Matter. It told the students that if you did not support the Black Lives Matter movement, you would not have supported the civil rights movement of the 1960s and the 50s. So comparing the two movements
Yeah.
as the same and saying that it's the same kind of people that resist the civil rights movement of the 60s that aren't into Black Lives Matter, that is not, they're
What's your
completely different.
Yeah, what is your, opinion, or what do you know or think about the Black Lives Matter movement?
So that's when I really started speaking up online. There was, that awful incident that happened with George Floyd where they didn't show the full tape, right?
Mhm, I know.
It was not
Very weird.
and it was blasted all over the mainstream media. CNN was making a ton of money from it, from a video of a black man dying, which already I'm sick of because that's a snuff video. Watching
Mhm,
someone die, all
mhm.
these people were first of all watching someone die.
Yeah.
We could watch there's deaths at the southern border all the time,
Oh,
but you
yeah.
don't see those videos being blasted for everyone to see.
No.
So they're picking and choosing who you're supposed to care about,
And
right?
there were some fishy, details if you do watch a lot of the video footage, and I will also add, there was a guy around here, Anthony McLean, who was shot in the back by a cop when he was running away from his friend getting stopped for a traffic thing, and the cop didn't give in his camera on, like, his webcam, whatever, and got away with it. And I'm sure you never heard of this guy because it was such an egregious situation that everyone would have united around it. So I think the
Yeah.
George Floyd thing was intentionally divisive.
Exactly, intentionally divisive, yes, and there's just the recent video of that black woman that was shot that was throwing the hot water pot. I don't know if you saw that?
I didn't see it.
Yeah, and it was pretty sad because you could tell that she was struggling with mental health issues,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
the police came simply because she had called them about something, and it ended up with her being shot, and of
Yeah.
course, th they're I don't see them rioting about that.
Yeah. They are
That
trigger
and it
happy, though,
really
I
was.
will say.
And I will say there are some cops that don't make good decisions. There are some
Yeah.
teachers that don't make good decisions. There's doctors. I would say there's far more doctors that are killing people than there
Oh,
are
yes.
officers,
Yes,
right?
definitely.
So I started speaking up during that time because I knew I saw a lot of my friends and family fall for the Black Lives Matter movement and support it. And I said, no, this movement is going to hurt Black America. And I started speaking up anonymously online because I was still a public school teacher at the time, and just basically condemning the movement and being like, you know what? The very first night of violent protests, a Black man died. If you are all about Black Lives Matter, why are your protests killing Black people? That year, more Black people were killed in the protests by the protesters than by police, than unarmed Black people by police. And it was just completely chaotic and crazy.
So that's what you didn't like about it, the violent kind of,
Yes, and it's based on a false premise. It's based on a premise that that police are systemically racist, that they need to be dismantled, and that's a false premise.
That's the setup, because once they do that, then you're just going to have a national police force, and then there's going to be no hope for accountability then.
Yes, and defunding the police and all of that.
That's a setup in my opinion.
Yeah, so I started speaking against that, and I knew that to be silent during this time would be against what God is calling me to speak up about. And I was on my knees praying, like in tears, because I knew I was going to lose friends and family if I really condemned this movement. And I did lose friends and family because of it. And I didn't have much of a following. I was on Facebook on a private account, and I was just basically debating my leftist friends.
Yeah.
and I started getting followers. I started getting people friend requesting me and sharing my posts. And eventually I turned it into a public profile, and I was like, okay. And I was still just writing. I wasn't making videos. I was just writing about condemning the movement, and here's why we shouldn't support it, and here's what they're doing, and here's what they're about. And eventually it led to gaining a following, and that led to people calling my school district trying to get me fired. And because I did come out while I was still a public school teacher.
I was wondering.
And then that was probably about 6 months before that. 6 months before I started coming out as myself, right? And then I decided to resign because.
Wow, that must have been hard. Why not let them fire you? Why not take it to the
I actually wish I did.
Oh, really? Because I think
I know some people who have won some lawsuits for.
Yeah.
But you know what? I needed to leave. It was getting.
Lawsuits are horrible.
Yeah, and also
horrible.
we were still shut down. This was the year of the 2021 school year. We were still shut down. And when they did open, they wanted us to all wear masks and enforce social distancing. And I just was tired of it. I was tired of having to censor myself all the time. And so the main reason why I quit my beloved career was so that I could, even I was holding back still when I was still a public school teacher. And so I left so that I could be uncensored.
Why do you think at that time exactly, so many people who I feel like the Black Lives Matter, to those methods and the message, and like it was a trick question to say to all lives matter or Black Lives Matter, that's just, that's obviously a trick. And even the COVID lockdown, this is like a similar mystery. I don't expect you to answer, but do you have any idea why your fellow teachers all fell for this stuff and actually would close ranks around you, who I feel like your position was kind of, this is all weird, why this is a break from our past, because you were saying it changed over time, and you were observing that. Why do you think hardly anybody else did observe that? Or do you think they just didn't have the courage, or what do you think?
I think it's a bit of both, but I do think that the mainstream media has done a real good job at brainwashing people. If you remember during COVID, there was a death clock, a constant death clock. And as soon as Biden was installed, that death clock was taken off CNN.
Yeah.
Because the numbers were actually more during his presidency. There was more people that died of COVID during him. Yeah, but when Trump was in president, there was this. Every day you'd go into CNN and there was this death clock. You go to CNN and there was constant sob stories about someone dying of COVID. Again, they were picking and choosing who you were supposed to care about.
Yeah.
And
so that's trauma.
Yeah. And you also have to be willing to look at the facts. So I remember one of the first things I did during COVID was look at the overall death rate. Is it affecting the overall
Me
death?
too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. With the fact that we were having higher suicide rates and higher overdose deaths.
Yeah.
So
I looked and saw that in Europe, where where most of the news was coming from, they had a way bigger spike with like a heat wave or cold
Yeah.
spell a couple of years
Yes.
prior to that. It's like, this doesn't even touch
Exactly.
that, and I didn't even hear
Exactly.
of that.
Exactly. So there was that. And there was just looking at the facts, which they censored like crazy. You couldn't say anything. You couldn't even talk about how they were putting COVID positive people into rest homes, where a common cold could kill someone who's on their way out already. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
and now that you draw that, maybe that's why they did, like, the BLM stuff because we were in a trauma state.
yes.
All of us were being
Oh,
terrorized.
absolutely, and
Yeah.
people were also put inside their homes, they were locked down,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, the nurses were like, "It's okay to go outside and protest.
Yes,
That's more
yes,
important."
yes, that's
And so
right.
people were like, I
Anything,
you
yeah,
remember
I'll
that
take it.
feeling of the streets being empty? I mean, I was in California, so it was nuts, right? You were too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was like there was police cars stationed because I was in Monterey. There was police cars stationed on the path that walks by the ocean to get people to not walk there. There was $100 fines for being outside without a mask on.
Which is so
Yes,
anti-scientific. They're
yes,
like, "Trust the science." Like, it's not that's not
yes.
science. That's not just think about it for 5 seconds.
Exactly. So it was it was just a very crazy time that led me to have a completely different life than what it was 5 years ago. And I miss it. I have been last year I actually hit a depression,
Yeah, it's sad.
depression in
It's
my
rough.
adult life that was
Yeah.
one of the hardest depressions I've ever gone through.
Wow.
And my husband was really sweet to me because he was like, "Your life is completely different than what it was 5
Yeah,
years ago. Everything you worked
yeah,
for and what your dreams were have been destroyed."
yeah,
And I've
yeah,
had to pick up and start all over again, and on top of it, I'm having to do it with so much hate from the left,
yeah,
just constant hate, and that gets in your head, and
yeah.
also getting used to social media and all of that. I didn't ask for any of this, like, I just was watching a YouTube video today, which I probably shouldn't watch, but this guy did a whole reaction to me and he's hates me, right? And one of the things he said is you do this so that you can get money from white people. I'm like, if I wanted to get money from white people, I would like open a horse farm or something. I would do something that doesn't require
Yeah,
so much.
there's not much money
Yeah,
any in
exactly.
this. I mean, it's free.
No,
Yeah,
and I am demonetized on Instagram.
yeah,
I don't make a
definitely,
thing. You know what I'm saying? Like
definitely.
I am still not matching my final salary I had as a public school teacher.
And pension, right? You had to
Yeah,
walk away from
exactly.
pension.
And health insurance and all of that. This has been
Yeah,
a major sacrifice for me.
and
But
California's
there's been
nice.
some blessings though too. I'm not gonna say it's all been bad, and I think it's very important to speak up, and it's not going to be easy to be on the front lines.
So, in when you did experience this depression and reaction, I know you said the reason that you went down this path, this difficult path, was, or the reason you had the strength was in your faith. So, was that in? And I think about this kind of thing, like, I fade in and out of having very strong faith, and then I'm like, it's kind of like Tolstoy had a quote where it's like sometimes I'm like, obviously, there you can see in every leaf of a tree, God, obviously, and then at other times he's like, how could there be a person who knows my name after I die? Like that can't be true. Just go back and forth, back and forth. But something like depression, real life problems that can even affect your brain chemistry and stuff. Did your faith help you get through that? Like how much is that still the driving force behind what you're doing and, when you pull yourself up?
I have I have always struggled with depression. I've always because this world is depressing.
Yeah.
If you're someone who has been through a lot of loss, abuse,
Yeah.
you have trauma from that you are like, this could happen again. I could have another sudden death. I could have, there's always going to be something to be worried about. There's always someone who's trying to put you down. And I realized last year that I was being spiritually attacked.
Mhm.
And no, just as much as God is real, and sometimes people need to see that
Yeah.
there's a dark side in order to go to the light. And I'm one of those kind of people.
Yeah.
And I was so discouraged and down. I realized that it was absolutely a spiritual attack when someone in my apartment complex committed suicide. And I was like, there is a dark spirit here. And
Yeah.
once I acknowledged that and was like, Lord, cleanse this place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have been doing so much better.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, and I feel so bad for the woman that did commit suicide. She went to the beach and just shot herself. And I think that is the real epidemic in this
Yeah.
country, is people just really struggling with being here on this earth.
This
And I don't know how people get through it without having some sort of hope. You have to have
Yes.
hope. And it may not be an earthly hope. It may be a heavenly hope. And that's what my faith gives to me, is hope.
I was wondering about your thoughts on something that I hadn't heard you talk about before, but I've been reading this as an aside. I've been reading this book about Son of Sam, who was a serial killer when I was little. I was in New
Mhm.
York, I was in grade school.
Yeah.
Ends up, it was a cult. It was a satanic cult, and he
Ugh.
wasn't the only guy. So I'm doing a show on it coming up, and I've been reading all these books on it, books that he would read as like this Satanist. So in one of the books, like the Satanist books, it's like we hate it when people are wearing crucifixes.
Mm.
So I like bought 3 crucifixes, wearing a crucifix. Um, but this mental health struggle that seems to be getting worse, and definitely I would say I predicted it, so it was definitely foreseeable, got worse during COVID. I feel like that's part of the capital T, their plan,
Absolutely.
policy,
Mhm.
but also, I mean, it feels very satanic because it's truly evil. And
Mhm.
you see things that way too, like that deeply.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I saw it with my students and how much what it did to them. Imagine what it's like for a young person to have their school shut down for a year. Remember, for us, a year is not as long as someone
Right.
who is 10 years old.
Yeah.
Years are very long for a 10-year-old because it
Yeah.
compounds. The longer you're here on this earth, the
Mhm.
faster time is. That's just how it is. And so these children were put through so much trauma that year, of being forced to wear a mask, being forced to stay home, being told that if they don't wear a mask, they're going to kill someone, being told that
Yes.
if, you have to stay away from people, um, in order to stay alive, right? And just the trauma of all of that, plus the lack of interaction.
Yes.
And there is a generation of children that were raised in that, especially the younger ones. They're going through the schools right now. In fact, the younger kids, like the kindergarten, first and second graders that didn't experience that, are doing better than like the third, fourth, and fifth graders that did experience that.
I had 3 teens in high school,
Mhm.
and, we were fairly new to the area, and, boy, it was a full-time job for a couple of years to get them through the mental health challenges that took, because they weren't really super tight with the people in their high school because they didn't go to grammar school with them, and they were forming
Mhm.
like these
Yeah.
little niches, like families, mothers actually enforcing cliques.
Wow.
And my kids weren't in pods, and I
Yeah.
would laugh. Their kids would come over and be like, "You don't have to wear a mask in this house. Come on, get real." And,
Yeah.
at first they were laughing, and after a while they were freaked out. And we did get the kids through it, but we had to learn some serious skills. I mean, I had to take skills classes. I had to take DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. We had to like to learn how to just keep our heads for a year and a half, and thank God they landed on their feet. But I come from a long line of drug addicts and stuff like this.
Yeah.
Having kids who can graduate high school was not a given for me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I was really worried about it, and I could see how the mental health issues, and nobody knew. This is totally uncharted territory. Yeah, so I would say, and that's when it just there's no other explanation than a satanic, something evil at the top. And
Yes,
around the whole
exactly. Yes,
globally.
and that's the thing, it was global, and that's where we have to be very like, when we hear rumblings of something happening globally, like, for example, right now, X just got banned in Brazil. X is being banned in UK. It's getting really hard, they're now
Really?
trying to shut him down. Yeah,
Oh,
X, Elon
because of the
Musk.
riots, which
Yes,
were
yes,
totally, I mean,
exactly.
provoked. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So now that we're hearing that it's happening in other countries, it's gonna come here pretty soon.
Yeah, I didn't know they took
Yeah,
that step yet.
especially if Kamala wins, we're gonna
Yeah.
probably have really crazy censorship.
The Bill of Rights is so important. Like, I'm not a, constitution thumping.
Yeah,
I come from being a libertarian and a
yeah,
narco-capitalist. Like, I'm not
yeah,
like that, but I had a radio show for a long time, and a really conservative on a conservative Georgia radio, and I had to like find common grounds with the regular listeners. So I said, look, we can all agree on the restraint of the federal government as enshrined in the Bill of Rights. And over that time, kind of a self-education, I realized that like gun rights, for example, the whole world, even though they lost their guns, they're not being oppressed because of it to the extent that they would if we lost our guns, because they're trying to get our guns away from us. And if we could point to Australia and all these other countries where the jackboots are out, then people would just double down. So and I think the whole, that I call it the thin parchment line. So we have some very well-defined protections that they violate like crazy. However, it's still better than not having it written down. And I think that's why those other places go first. But yeah, I agree. It's like California.
Yes.
California is the prototype for New York, for example. I used to, live back and forth those two places, and you could see smoking was banned out here. We laughed at it in New York, and then
boom. Yeah.
Real bad.
Right.
It was
and that's what I'm saying. Like, it's starting in Brazil, it's starting in the UK. It's
Yeah.
eventually going to head here with the banning of full social media platforms.
Yeah. So okay. Interesting. When you think about what happened there in California, like Newsom started that privilege test or whatever, what do you think is in it for him? Like, we've got the big picture. Yes, there's like an evil force that's basically controlling the world. On a lower level, do you think it's political brownie points? Do you think they're taking orders? Like, where is that? Do you have any feeling of where that might be come from? And Florida's different. Why?
So if you look at the pharmaceutical company, they have an incentive to keep people sick. You know what I'm saying? They have an incentive to always make sure there's sick people so that they can prescribe them a pill and make money.
Yeah.
Same with the Democrat Party. They have an incentive to always have unsatisfied, poor people that feel like everything needs to change. I mean, look at Obama's campaign. Look at Kamala's campaign. It's all this whole hope thing, and things need to change, and we need radical change in this country because so you need to have an unsatisfied populace to do that. And I think a lot of this critical race theory, Marxism, is to create this unsatisfaction in a generation that capitalism needs to be dismantled, that the Constitution's racist, which that is one of the main goals of critical race theory, is to say that these institutions were created to uphold white supremacy. So therefore, these institutions need to be dismantled.
Okay. I've got to rethink. So finish what you're saying, and then I have to ask you.
So again, they need customers. When you're a Democrat voter, it's really a vote for, we need to make sure we're helping the people. It's not a vote for less government. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I love the analogy of the pharma because I've noticed that sick people aren't enough. They now need just normal people to take drugs all the time, which is what the mental health stuff is.
Yes.
Just get, or vaccines. It's for well people. They can, this is stuff they can just make happen to the entire population, even just lifestyle changes. Everybody on screens all the time. You gotta, all of a sudden we all have a Prozac deficiency because we can't live life without it. So similarly, the Democrats used to, or liberals, or whatever you want to call it, would say they're poor people and we need to feed them. But even despite all their best efforts to keep people poor, that isn't a strong enough incentive. There aren't enough people like that. So they have to say, you might not be poor. That's why they say food insecure, because they're not talking about hungry people. They're not talking about starvation. They're talking about people who are worried about it. And that is the poverty now. And so if they can get inside your head, then there's never any end to you feeling like you're at the bottom. And it's all just about, it's also relative. So it has to be you at the bottom.
Exactly.
But the thing about the Constitution and I lived in Atlanta when I did that radio show, it was really fantastic because Atlanta, I think it's half Black. I mean, it's really like a very diverse community, and diverse, but also I think, it's almost equal in Black and white, and then a lot of other whatever minorities or immigrant stuff. But it was a call-in show, and it would really give the lie to what we're told people are thinking, wanting, feeling, and I would have many, many Black callers who would say, stuff like, "Y don't regardless, even if the origins of the Constitution, even if things weren't just right then, just look at it objectively. It's the best we're gonna do. Now that we can participate in it is not the time to throw it away. Like, this is the baby in the bathwater."
Absolutely. I 100% agree
Yeah,
with you on that. We
yeah,
finally have the America Black America
yeah,
can succeed in, and
yeah.
it's sad that we're throwing it all away for Marxism.
And, I'm gonna ask you this question. You're much younger than I am, but I grew up, like, in the '80s in the New York area, and it was to say anything racist or anti-Semitic or even to think like that was taboo. I didn't know
Mhm.
anybody who ever said or thought that stuff. Like, it was just unheard of. You'd be ostracized. And I see that it's been brought back. This is my feeling, is that racism was intentionally brought back. Maybe, and the same thing with like going too far with trans stuff, to radicalize, to polarize. And so, and I actually think when Obama was elected, the joy, I mean, I vote for Ron Paul all the time. So
Mhm.
I've never voted for any, hardly ever. But the joy, especially in Atlanta, where I was at the time, was really palpable, and I was happy. I was like, "You know
Mhm.
what? Maybe this will bury the hatchet." So we gotta have to
Yeah.
have a little socialism for people
Yeah.
to feel like, okay, half the country. It wasn't like fewer people voted for him because he was Black. More people voted for him, and he had this opportunity to change this country, to cure that, to heal that. I remember Eric Holder said, "It's time for us to have honest conversations about race." And I was like, "Yes, that would be so great." And then he's like, "We're at complete odds, and there's no reconciling it." And that's the honest conversation. And it was just really, really sad. And I think that was the turning point. And it saddens me because now this country, it could have been, and somebody somewhere just would not have it.
Well, it's a fact. If you look at polls about race relations, if you
Oh,
poll when people were polled in the 90s, the race relations were more positive. They said that
yeah, I believe
things
that.
are, and now when you look at a poll, now when they poll people about race relations, they're now saying that there's a lot more racism than there was in the 90s, and race relations are not as good as they used to be. And I think we all remember that. We all remember that. And even just it actually breaks my heart because we have such a great country. I mean, millions upon millions of people want to come here. And you look at Black and brown run countries, and this is something that people will say is racist or whatever, but they're not that great. You look at the super corrupt government.
Yeah, for
Um,
whatever reason, maybe
yeah,
it's because they don't have a constitution, whatever.
exactly,
Cuck
exactly. They just weren't set
constitution.
up
Yeah,
like how we are set up.
yeah.
And what's amazing about this country is that we do elevate people of other color. I was just when I watched the Olympics, even though most people are boycotting them, I still watched them because I love the
It's not
Olympics.
fun, yeah.
Our country is so incredibly diverse. You look at the Chinese, it's all Chinese people on
Oh,
their
yeah,
programs. You
yeah.
look at, the any of these other countries, it's all the same race. That's
Yeah, and
uh,
and there's plenty of racism. People come to this country from their old country, and they
yeah,
bring some racism there, which
yeah,
I don't care. What do I care?
yeah,
But they don't want their Asian daughter dating the white guy, which is like a losing battle if you're coming to this country. But
exactly.
they bring it, and so that they have some. They have it in their own country, and yet they get criticized. So which means they're really fabricating or provoking it on purpose for this divisiveness, which can cause votes, but it can also, keep us from noticing that they're pulling away all these protections. They're
Exactly.
eroding
Mhm.
the Bill of Rights. It's creating that problem. So I wanted to ask you two more questions, and then I
Sure.
want to talk about what you're actually doing
Yeah.
that I feel like is extremely hopeful.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to ask about you said that you had a weekend where you just, and this was like it seems like it was both a spiritual and a political turning point. I think it was during the Obama era. And you just said, I'm prioritizing Jesus. I think maybe
Mhm.
if I could paraphrase what you said. And I just wondered if you could tell a little bit about what what that transition, what prompted it, and then, what came out of it.
It's funny you asked me about that. Where did you get that? Because I don't talk about my
Yeah, I was
testimony a
I
lot.
I was really, like, binging on your stuff,
Yeah.
so I didn't listen to your show because
Yeah.
you have a show, but I listened to, an interview with a couple of, they seemed evangelical, like
Uh-huh.
a couple of Christian,
Yeah.
husband and
Interesting.
wife team. I
Yeah.
forget their
I
names,
don't
sorry.
so I don't share a lot about my testimony because I got it's hard
You
to
don't
explain.
have
I
to,
need to
no
share it.
pressure.
I need to share it. But
No
I had a
pressure.
lot of people say things about me personally that I know. In fact, there was people that wanted to 5150 me that weekend. Yeah.
That weekend,
Yes.
immediately.
So the best way I
Wow.
can explain it is the realm was opened. It was very supernatural. And this is coming from someone who hates scary movies. I've never dabbled in any sort of witchcraft or any of that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah, right. Feet on the
and
ground.
yes, exactly. And I had a an really intense supernatural experience that woke
Wow,
me up. Yeah.
wow.
And, I still
That'll
look
do
back at
it.
it and I pray to God, I'm like, "What was that about?" Like,
Yeah.
um, well, it started with my grandma recently passed away,
Mm,
and
mm,
she was my best friend,
mhm.
and it was a really sudden loss,
Oh,
and, I was partying a lot at the time. I wasn't doing any, like, crazy drugs or anything, but drinking and stuff like that, and I started getting a spirit come to me at night that would resemble my grandma, and it was actually a demon impersonating my grandma.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
because they
not
can do
surprised.
that,
Yeah.
and, it terrified me. It was like, "This is not my grandma," and having something supernatural like that, you're kinda like you have 2 choices. You can either think you're going crazy, or you can be like, "Alright, what's going on?" Like, this is
Yeah.
I mean, it was so intense to the point where my grandma, when she used to come in my bedroom, she used to always shake my toes. She used
Yeah.
to always do this, like, and she had the same warm hands, and she'd shake my toes. That's what this thing did to
Wow. And
me.
only you can know that. It's
Yeah.
like, you're not trying to convince anybody. It's
No,
you just
no.
only you can know.
And
Yeah, yeah,
and so that led me to open up my Bible, get back in God's
yeah.
word, and just it terrified me. Like I said, I didn't like it. I had some of my mom's new age friends. I shared with one of my mom's new age friends about it, and she was like, "You need to light a candle and invite it." I'm like, "No."
No, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Good thing that you recognize,
So
because
that
what's
was
the harm?
about
Even if it was your grandma, who cares? You know what
yes,
I mean? Like, there's no reason to take that chance. You don't, you know what I mean?
exactly.
She
And so
doesn't
that
need to. She's not gonna scare you
yeah,
anyway.
no. And so it turns out that as soon as I started getting in God's word and praying about it, it manifested it itself as a demon. To the
Wow.
point where and this like I said, I've never dabbled in any of this stuff.
Yeah, right.
I'm a very like I said, like
Yeah,
you said
feet on the ground, yeah.
yeah, like feet on the ground. And it was to the point where there was a demon that would pace my porch. And it was this big, tall figure that would just pace my porch. I lived in a studio and I had like a porch that overlooked this little river, and you could double door, double window, double sliding glass door to get out there, and I could see it. And it's this big giant figure pacing my porch. And I it was it's like I said, I don't share this very often because people
Yeah.
misinterpret it or they'll say things like I had people say that I talk to the dead, all kinds of
Well,
stuff. And I'm like,
you're in the
"Oh,
right
yeah."
place, because
Okay, good.
a lot of these people believe, which I don't like, the UFO stuff, and,
Yeah,
they interdimensional beings, like, that's people are very, and James Delingpole is a big podcaster out of
yeah,
England, and he talks about people interacting with demons and seeing them. You should, I
yeah.
don't know him
So
personally.
what really
I would
helped me
recommend that
actually
you talk to
was
him. Yeah.
reading the testimony of it's called, gosh, what's the name? Oh, I forget the name. It's this guy named Roger Morneau, and he was a huge Satanist, and he turned to Christian.
Wow, interesting.
And, A Trip into the Supernatural is called the book.
Okay.
And he shared his experience of being a high up Satan worshiper.
Oh, I have to read it.
Yeah, And
because that's real.
one of the things he said in it
They're
is
doing that.
when he started doing Bible studies with this beautiful couple. This was like in the late 70s, early 80s, I think, because he's now passed away. When he started doing Bible studies and becoming a Christian, the demons that he used to worship and Satan were really angry, and they used to pace outside of his hallway of his apartment.
Yeah.
And so when I heard that, I was like, oh my goodness, that's what's happening to me. I'm getting this pacing demon outside of my double glass doors. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when everything became really real. And when you read the Bible, it spoke to me in such a powerful way. And God worked in my life in such a powerful way. And then that weekend happened where I literally lost everything. I lost everything over a weekend.
Wow.
And it was very intense and supernatural. I would say it was almost like I was in like a vision. I don't know. I can't really explain. I don't share it all completely, but like I was in a vision. I lost everything. I lost my car. I ended up in an ambulance. It was insane. Right.
Wow.
And completely woke me up. And since then I quit everything. I quit drinking. I quit smoking. I quit, dressing like a hoochie mama. I quit I quit men. Like I was not going to fornicate. Like I am going to be with my husband. Like that's the next man I'm going to be with. And that's that. Like
this maybe prepared you for what you had to do this time around.
Exactly.
Because what you did, not too many people. So
and all people thought I went crazy. Like some of my friends and family members thought I went crazy and wanted me to be 5150'd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you weren't crazy.
And I remember telling them I'm not crazy. Like this is really happening.
Yeah, I mean, crazy is crazy. We know crazy people, and I love crazy. There are people I know in my life who I love them, but they're crazy. And then there's a little bit crazy. So things are just not quite connecting right. And there's like totally full on crazy, but not crazy. What you're saying does not make you crazy. And it's
and the proof is
happening
in
to you.
the pudding. I mean, it's been almost 15 years now. So I'm not like in a loony bin now.
Yeah,
I'm just a completely changed woman who, and my politics changed in that weekend.
Wow.
Yeah. From that moment I could tell that Obama was an evil man, and I loved him before that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I watched, it's such a edgy show, The Boondocks, which Aaron Magruder, it's such an edgy show. I don't like to say I watch, but it's very funny. And, he said the character Huey is like himself as a boy. It's a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And when Obama was, oh no, this is Aaron Magruder himself. When Obama was elected, they asked him what he thought about it. And he said he was cautiously pessimistic. And I remember thinking that definitely panned out.
Yeah.
So he was right about that. And I definitely recognize, I mean, I've been reading so much about actual Satanism in this country.
That's interesting that we connected.
It's fascinating. I mean, it's happening. You can say that it's being used to control people and it's not real, but the Satanism is real. Is Satan real? Like you have to figure that out for yourself. But these guys are saying that they're talking to demons and they're getting power from them.
Yes.
And they're doing things, killing, raping virgins, arson, killing animals. These are some of the things they are meant to do before big holidays and stuff. I mean, it's definitely real. That part is
when you look at Oprah's very new age. She says on her property she goes and speaks to dead ancestors, to slave ancestors. Those are demons that she's talking to, and she gets advice from them.
Yeah, I have an aunt.
The Black Lives Matter movement, the lesbian founders of Black Lives Matter movement, they talk about how they speak with their ancestors, and it's demons that are impersonating their ancestors.
I went to a medium once, and my mother, who's very, very Catholic. I mean, 4 hours a day, just a rosary, the church, everything, all the time. And she was like, "Yeah, that's fine." And I said, "Really? Okay, whatever." And then I talked to my aunt, it was my father's sister. My father was way more hardcore, like with that stuff. And I told my Aunt Margaret, it's like, "Yeah, so I went to a medium." She says, "Oh, my dear girl."
Yeah.
And I said, "What? You think it's a ripoff?" She said, "Oh, it's real. It's absolutely real." And she was an English teacher, and she in the projects, and she talked like she was Grace Kelly. It was so funny. And she said, "Oh no, it's real. but they're demons.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
was like, oh crap,
Yep.
don't speak with them. I
Mhm.
was like, okay.
And the proof is in the pudding. The people that
Yeah.
are mediums, they're not strong Christians.
Yeah.
They're very much into the occult, and they're into all of that.
And that replaces religion, by the way. So that's
Yes.
when the kids do those kinds of things that, a lot of stuff isn't overtly that, Ouija boards maybe, but tarot cards and
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's very attractive because it's fun. It's super
Yes.
fun. Even horoscopes probably
Yeah.
are the kind
Yeah.
of like not supposed to see the future that way.
Mhm.
So let me ask this one weird little question.
Sure.
Since you were on both sides of the political spectrum, whatever, are the people on the left, do they just think that half the country, whether you call them Republicans or Christians or white people or whatever, do they think that that they're just evil, bad, stupid? Like they feel like we're. I mean, I'm a hardcore libertarian, so I don't know what label you want to put on me other than that, but it seems like the left feels like anyone not on the left is bad, crazy, or stupid. And do they really think that half of humanity is that level of dysfunctional? Half of humanity?
Yes.
Okay.
And a short answer, if
Okay.
you could go into a room full of leftists and just be a
Yeah.
fly on the wall and
Yeah.
bring up the right or
Yeah.
conservatives and hear how they speak about them.
Mhm.
And I think it happens on both sides, though. I think that our side thinks the same about
Now
yeah,
now,
you
I
know?
I think I blame Trump, but
Yeah.
identity politics is now on the right.
Oh, yeah.
And
There
they
is.
tried for many, many years since the '80s to get it on the right, and they could not get it on the
Mhm.
right, but also part of the fact that the left just went too far,
Yes.
I think they did that on
It's a
purpose
reaction. It's a
to do that.
reaction.
Yeah, the
And
reaction of action.
have you heard of Hegelian dialectic
Oh,
thesis,
definitely.
antithesis, consensus? That's what they want.
Yes.
They
Yeah,
want the friction in order to bring in the solution, you
yes.
know?
That's a
Um,
great segue.
yes. I mean, it's
You've got a
definitely what I
solution.
thought. When I met a dude that was a Republican, I was like, "Ew."
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I
the
had
wife
such
beater.
I remember when my cousin joined the military as a Marine, and I was just like, "Oh, you're joining the military as a Marine? Like, that's so gross." Like, that's just so s
He's
I mean, it's so
probably a pretty studly guy. I mean,
yeah,
I have a problem with
exactly.
our foreign policy, but the guys who sign up are courageous and competent and, the finest specimens of humanity among us, and
Exactly,
pretty
exactly.
fine.
So, I mean, you have this mindset that and they demonize the right constantly. And if you are in a
Yeah,
bubble and you don't really get to experience what it's like to be on the right or to be around people that are right leaning and really pick their brain. I mean, I've had so many people call me awful names on the left, but they've never actually sat down to ask me my beliefs and why I believe them. They just
yeah,
make so many assumptions.
yeah, it's an
And
emotional thing. It's not a
yeah,
talking thing.
yes, and it's also a religion, so they're very
Mhm.
passionate about their leftism because it's very much a religion for them, and, and they also don't have a lot to offer, so the best way to recruit more people to their side is to demonize the other side. We have a lot to offer, like,
Yeah,
Republican side or the right-leaning side, we're like prosperity and
yes,
freedom and
yeah,
border security and, like,
yeah,
less taxes. I mean,
individuality,
just
yeah,
that right there. The fact that the
yeah.
government could take less of your money, that's a huge, huge
Well, you
offering.
would be a big target because it's very important, I think, for the silos. So Clarence Thomas, I remember that.
Mhm.
And Sarah Palin, who's not eh, she I don't like her position on foreign policy either. However, they don't like they want anyone who is on the right to be, the white male. They need the silos. They need to have everybody whatever white male, Christian, whatever on their side, or it really creates a problem for them. And what they did to Clarence Thomas was really terrible. They played into every stereotype and unabashedly they same thing with Sarah Palin. Like this was a woman who she got to the pretty much the highest anyone had gotten to that point, but she was I think she was pregnant when she got married. Her daughter was pregnant. She was pregnant with a child with Down syndrome, like all the things that should make her pro-abortion, and she was still the highest achieving woman in the country, and they were so vicious about her, and I have a child with Down syndrome, so
Yeah.
what they were saying about her and how disgusting it was that she was bringing this leech into the world
Ugh.
and, terrible, terrible things. It was more vicious than anything I'd ever seen, and it was from the people who say they champion a woman's right to choose, not so much. So,
No.
uh,
No.
but I of all these things that so we probably actually went a little darker than you normally do, although
Yeah.
you do have a hilarious side and your, parody video with the mask. I I I'm not gonna play it now, but with your permission, on my regular
Sure.
show,
Of course.
sometimes I play
Yeah.
clips. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
gonna okay, 'cause I know you're very serious about your endeavor, which is a joint venture with your husband from what I gather,
Mhm. Yes.
and it's a really fine solution, and is it called the Exodus Institute? Is that how
Yes.
you refer to it?
Exodus Institute.
So
Mhm.
tell people about that because and this is like nationwide, anyone can do it, right?
Mhm.
So tell people what the solution, I love it.
Well, we opened an online K through 12 school,
Awesome.
and it's fully accredited. It's for parents that want to pull their kids from public school, but don't necessarily want to do all of the homeschooling. And we are education without indoctrination. Our fully accredited program is just straightforward school. We have an optional Christian program and we have optional
Oh.
non-Christian. So for people that aren't Christian, but like I said, it's just straightforward education without the indoctrination.
I didn't
And
know it
yeah,
had a non-Christian oh, wow, that's
yes,
awesome. That's
yes.
great.
And then we also have a second school called Young Patriots Academy that is an enrichment program that's only $20 a month. Now that is indoctrination, if you want to say
Yeah,
that, but it's very we basically counter the left. And so we
yeah.
teach children the truth and we share with them, like for example, I have a lesson called What Happened in Venezuela, where we go into the socialist collapse of Venezuela and they learn about it. And I have a lesson debunking Black Lives Matter. I have a lesson about the American dream. I have a lesson about George Washington Carver and how amazing he was for race relations and his
Oh, I
Booker T.
didn't even know
Washington.
that.
And that program's only $20 a month. And that's for anyone who just wants to make sure their kids, especially someone who has kids in public schools or is worried about their child being indoctrinated before they go into college. They want to make sure that their child is solid
What
and
age group
ready.
is that for?
Say again?
Is that also K through 12?
That's 5th through 12th grade.
K
Yeah.
through 12, okay.
So that's only $20 a month.
Wow.
So, and it's over 75 lessons that are on demand taught by me or my husband. And my students really, really love that program. And I was a middle school teacher for most of my career. So I'm really good at, God has given me skills to make lessons interesting.
Mhm, that's your gift.
And so that's, I have students turning in their work all the time. And I love that part. The fully accredited K through 12 program, that is not taught by me, but we have very carefully vetted teachers that are not woke and won't ask your child for their pronouns and just teach their subject.
Is that interactive? How does that work?
So it can be, if you want to pay a little more, you can have live lessons with the teachers, or it can be all on demand with teacher support by email, video, or phone calls.
So if I just want people to understand what it is. So if so I never homeschooled my kids because
Yeah.
I just didn't think I could possibly ever do it. It was just too overwhelming. So this is every day you have kids of 3 different ages and they can and we all know how to Zoom school now. They can log on all day. They can get everything they need from this and they can
Yes.
graduate.
Yes, it's fully accredited. It's whatever, they get a high school diploma if they're in the high school program. We also offer classes that most public schools don't offer, like how to open a small business, entrepreneurship style classes. We have classes on, accounting and creating a budget, stuff like that. So life skills as well. And those are all a la carte you can add to your program.
So if you don't opt for the live classes,
Mhm.
do you still interact with a teacher? Like, does somebody look
Yes.
at your work?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You're just not logging in to have the live session with the teacher. You get the session, you get it all on video, right? But then the teacher is accessible by email and they grade all the work and they look at it all. But it's whenever you want. So if you have a child that isn't very great in the morning and they want to do their work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, then they can just log in and do it then. And our program is really successful. We've had really good graduation rates, much better than
Wow.
public schools. Yes.
So
And
it's
our
not
students are
just a
thriving.
private school.
Yes.
It's a
Uh-huh.
private school. It's just an
Yeah.
online private school.
Exactly. Exactly.
And when the internet first came out, whatever, or when I started thinking about it many, many years ago, I thought I was thinking about it for college. They should just get the smartest guy in whatever it is.
Exactly.
He
Uh-huh.
should do the one lecture, because I went to Harvard and there were 700 people in my class. And when I went to actually ask the teacher a question, he literally looked at me and said, "Do I look like a secretary to you? Like, I have someone that you need to talk to before you can talk
Yeah.
to me." So I was like, what's the point of that being
Yeah.
a live situation? And I thought, actually, as an added thing, if it was online, people should write question. This would be if it was super scaled up, but
Yeah.
write a question. There's like, see, I don't know if you can see, there's a chat here.
Yeah.
Write a question. And then if your question is already up there, thumbs up it, and it should go to the top. And if you had even 1,000,000 people, basically everybody's questions would be answered too. It just feels very scalable to me. Very
Yes.
scalable.
It is very scalable.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's cool.
And it's been a lot of work, especially opening it. My husband and I
I'm sure.
cashed out our California retirements to take a year off to get the school launched and to make our own videos and to advertise it. We've been open for almost 2 years now. We have about 180 students. Um,
Wow.
I recruit mainly through social media, so it has been hard whenever I get censored, and I do get
Yeah.
censored a lot.
But
I've
that's
had
a lot of
Yeah.
students. My kids
Yeah.
went to a school so small that it had I mean, in real life, but probably less students than that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a real
Uh-huh. It is.
that's
It's
excellent.
Yeah, I gotta thank my husband because he has a, master's in business and
Yeah,
he's
he's
very
the
much
business guy, yeah.
Yeah, I would not have been able to do this by myself. I'm
Yeah,
more of
no,
a
you need
teacher
both, yeah.
mascot type, but
Well, you have a one specific skill, and some things are just not like, I always think Mark Zuckerberg is obviously fake, because there's absolutely no way. He was like a Greek major in high school,
wow.
and
Yeah.
then he's drops out, invents the coolest thing ever, testifies before Congress, runs one of the biggest companies in the world. It's like, you know what? You're lucky you got one of those things,
Yeah.
and
True.
we're lucky that you have that one thing that you do, and it's
Yeah.
great that you're
Just
paired up
being a
with somebody
teacher.
who can
Uh-huh.
complement
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
I am going to, if you can give me like a minute or two to just kind of look through this chat and see if anybody
Sure.
wanted to talk to you
Yeah.
directly. If anybody has any questions for Kali, you can write it now. I'll just zip through and see if there's anything in
And
here.
and if you wanna learn about my school, you can go to
Yeah, let
yeah,
me
you can
write that down.
sure.
What's the
Think
URL?
thinkexodus.org. Thinkexodus.org. You can check it out. We've had recently several kids enroll in the $20 a month enrichment program, and that's like my favorite thing I do right now, which is when I see them turn in their lessons. Um, I have a lesson where they have to budget for real life, and they go on Zillow and get a house, and they go on cars.com and buy a car, or they go to Walmart to get their groceries, and they have to put together they have to take out the taxes, and the reality of that for the students is really
Yeah.
exciting to see in their reaction of what it's like. And I give them a certain budget. They have to create the budget with a very small amount, and and then I go into the 3 rules to stay out of poverty, which is a well-tested
What are they?
statistic. 1, get married. 2, wait to have kids till after you're married, and 3, get a job. That's it. Those are the 3 rules. That's it. If you do those
Boy.
3 things, you are literally not gonna be in poverty. If you
Yeah.
break those 3 rules, your chances of being in poverty is really high.
That's interesting, because when my daughter, it was very hard for us during lockdown, very hard. And when my daughter graduated from high school, I said, this is, I never went to a funeral of somebody who, in my family, I had a couple of people die of drug abuse,
Mhm.
and, they just couldn't finish high school. Like, they couldn't finish
Yeah.
things.
Oh, yeah.
And I just thought, if you can just hit those bars that feel like no big deal, it's so significant, that you're on track. And so with this indoctrination, you have your kids can be, liberal, or they're no longer going to church or whatever. And I always say, like, they're going to turn back when they'll stop being liberal when they get their first paycheck
Yeah.
and see all that's taken out, and they'll find religion when they have their first baby.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
this
I
is
like
a
that.
miracle.
Yeah.
I love this baby.
Yes.
All right, so I'm gonna read some of these comments.
Sure.
Callie says, I'm still in California too with my family, but hey, we share the same name.
Yep.
8 says, I was born and raised in LA. I left for Texas a couple of years ago. You can't pay me to go back. I did live in
Oh,
Texas for a long time
yeah.
and I really liked it.
Yeah.
Oh, and the G towers are making us not healthy now.
I have one close to me too. It's not good.
Yeah, no, I don't like them either. Said my wife is from a third world country, and when she saw Texas for the first time, she said that that's what she imagined America would be like. Um, yeah, but LA is like a third world country now.
Mhm.
And people don't realize what that really means. What that really means is there are super rich people who live
Yep.
behind fences.
Yes,
That's what a
exactly.
third world. I
There's
was in Peru,
India, there's really rich people. All of them have really
Peru, which is very
uh-huh.
poor country. I
Yes.
mean, it
Mhm.
was just there's a huge wall. There's one neighborhood that you can go to, Mila Flores or something. Um, okay, Freedom said, oh, the Freedom Conversation. Hi. Says, my question for 4 years is this: why the coasts? Why did California, New York, British Columbia, and Nova Scotia have the most draconian COVID response by far? I have an answer. What's yours,
Oh,
Kali?
I don't. So I
Oh,
wanna hear what yours is.
I saw it the
Yeah.
minute it happened. The minute it happened, I said, oh, there are way more Democrats than you need in LA. 90% of the people are Democrats. And there's 30 million people here. If you could get 1 million of those people to move to Austin or, a fringy place or a smaller state, you
Oh,
got blue everywhere. And
wow.
that's exactly what happened. You know how they did it out here? They closed the gyms. People
Wow.
left because the gyms
Yeah.
and, taxes too, but they were
That
like, you
happened
could
in
go there.
Florida. We got a lot of blue people down here
Yeah.
because of COVID. They
Yeah.
wanted all the freedom, but then they were like, "We hate Ron DeSantis."
Yeah, they don't get it. I
Yeah,
know,
they wanna go out to dinner and complain about Ron
and
DeSantis
the
while
third
everyone
world
else
countries
shut
too.
down.
They come up
Yeah.
here and they're exploited for their socialist voting, and it's just they are actually, Europeans have this too, like rich Europeans. They just think of the world in terms of, uh, something up there needs to take care of something down here, and they just don't have the view of a human. That's the thing about the libertarian versus the liberals, that you have this, human being is a special thing, and
Yeah,
any is that should have the confidence that they can stand on their own 2 feet.
totally.
um Hold on. Critical race is communism in disguise.
Instead of dividing people by class, you divide people by color.
Yeah, and that you can't. What are you gonna do about that? You can't
Mhm,
fix that. There's no fixing that. What is even the point of it?
mhm.
A private school near me added DEIB, a full-time non-binary director of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I
It's
mean,
happening in a lot of private schools too. It's not just public schools, it's private schools as well. Yeah, and that's a really good way to actually, filter a school, is to go talk to the principal and be like, "Do you guys have any DEI initiatives?" And if the principal's like, "Yes," go, "Okay, we're gonna go look at another school."
yeah, out here though, we went to look at different private schools, and other than Catholic schools, and we're Catholic, they basically had the same thing. And
Yeah,
and two of my kids went to two of those schools. We just made the decision that we could get them through it. And all the emails during COVID were the same. They're definitely part of an organization that I think it's called like Independent Schools or whatever. I wanted to ask you about this, and then I'll wrap it up. This The deliberate dumbing down of America. Charlotte Easerbite talks about that, but there was also one with the same name by John Taylor Gatto, who quit kind of like you in New York. He was teacher of the year for many years, or more than once, and he quit with a letter to the Wall Street Journal, I think, saying his conscience cannot abide teaching kids the way they want him to teach them. And that was a very long time ago, before it was anywhere near as bad as you. Do you know John Taylor Gatto?
no, I don't.
Ah,
Uh-huh.
you must. I'm gonna send you a present.
Okay.
So, we'll talk about that after. Oh my gosh, there's just too many. There's too many. I can't do it. I'm sorry. I love you all, but in the future, I'm gonna tell you to, uh, put little stars next to it if you want me to pull it up. So here's just one directly talking to you, Kali. I admire the dedication you have for providing a sane education for young people. I think that's where we should end it. So,
Amen. Yeah.
Kali, thank you so much. I know I catch a little bit over, but it
It's
was
fine.
so valuable. Yeah, I
It's really
enjoyed
nice to
that.
just be able to sit and talk with like-minded people
Yes.
and last year I stopped doing interviews for a while because I was in such a dark place. So it's nice to be
Yeah.
back and
Yeah. And this is a little of a
Mhm.
different audience for you probably
Yeah.
because we more identify with Ron Paul. We don't believe
Yeah.
the two-party system anymore at all.
Yeah.
We've It's slightly more hopeless, but at the same time more hopeful because that's not where the hope lies anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
You're
Well, I'm
ahead of
happy
us
to
on
be here.
that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'll see you in a second. I'm going to say goodbye to you all. Thank you so much for coming. Wasn't that lovely? Big snaps for Kali. Okay, see you next time. This is Monica Perez.